Welcome, everyone. A lot of everyone. I just want to make sure that you can hear me, but you can't hear my heart beating. It's okay? Because I can. Wow. A wonderful event, a wonderful opportunity that brings us together. And I welcome all of you, honored guests, friends, and members of this human family, both in Seattle and joining us from around the world via webcast. I'm Mark Power, a member of Nalanda Bodhi, and on behalf of Dzogchen Punlop Rinpoche, Nalanda Bodhi, and Nalanda West, and with special thanks to Seeds of Compassion organizers for continuing the inspiration that was begun with His Holiness the Dalai Lama 7 years ago. I want to welcome you to a call to compassionate action with His Holiness the 17th Karmapa Ugin Trinley Dorje. And with special thanks and welcome to His Holiness's sister, Udrip Paldzom. Greetings to the member of the Board of Directors for Karmapa Foundation and for the staff of Karmapa Foundation. For those of you who may not know, Nalanda Bodhi is an international organization of Buddhist study and meditation centers founded by Dzogchen Punlop Rinpoche in 1996. The vision of Nalanda Bodhi at Punlop Rinpoche's direction is to effect a skillful, culturally relevant translation of the Buddha's wisdom and compassionate methods appropriate to the 21st century. Rinpoche's book, Rebel Buddha, perfectly illustrates this vision with keen cultural sensitivity, down-to-earth profundity, and unique humor. Nalanda Bodhi has wonderful teachers, acharyas, lamas, and mitras, and an excellent contemporary curriculum. If you'd like to know more, you can contact Nalanda Bodhi at our Fremont home, Nalanda West, or online. I'm honored to be part of today's inspired event and to appreciate together the aspirations and actions of compassion that are all growing so vividly in our communities. Here today, each of us has a powerful opportunity to bring to life a beautiful dream, borrowing from the great call to compassion by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. A beautiful dream of common intention, of heart and mind, of courage, of wisdom, through the expression of compassion and kindness. In her poem, Kindness, the poet Naomi Shihab Nye reflects, "Before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak to it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows and you see the size of the cloth. And then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore." The poet says, until you see the size of the cloth. And I think we can recall in recent news the earthquake in Nepal, which brings vividly to mind the scale of human suffering and the great need of our compassion. The purpose of our gathering today is to explore that tender border, the border where kindness and sorrow find exchange. And not only ask ourselves what calls us to compassion, but to take one small step in the direction of answering that call. You'll hear and see many ways to take that step. There are many organizations represented here and who'd be happy to help you put a concrete face, so to speak, on a way to bring your aspiration into form. And during the course of our afternoon, we will have, after His Holiness has made remarks, we will have panelists join us, and we will be introduced to their organizations and conversation that will ensue. So as we prepare to welcome His Holiness to the stage, I'd like to invite us all to share a moment of quiet. A small individual offering of peace. And knowing that world peace depends on each small act of kindness to offer that peace to someone as nourishment. So we'll take just a few moments in silence together. Thank you. I welcome to the stage Mitra Dean Tyler Dewar, who will provide introduction for His Holiness Karmapa. Mitra Tyler is Dean of the Mitra Council, or the Teachers' Council of Nalanda Bodhi. As well, Mitra Tyler is a distinguished author, scholar, and translator of the Tibetan language. And many of you will recognize him for his translation work with His Holiness in the context of this current tour. His knowledge, clarity, and humor build elegant bridges of understanding which make it possible to have the conversation we're embarking on today. Welcome, Mitra Dean Tyler.
Thank you, Mitra Mark, and welcome, everyone, once again. I have the wonderful good fortune and the great honor of serving as one of the English language translators for His Holiness Karmapa during some of his past teachings and as well as this present tour of the United States. And I've been given the great honor as well as the intimidating challenge of introducing His Holiness Karmapa this afternoon. So I thought I would speak about His Holiness and his activities in terms of authenticity, innovation, and inspiration. And why, for me personally, these three qualities make His Holiness a very significant figure in terms of the questions we all have about whether peace will be possible in the world, about whether it will be possible to establish a strong presence of sanity as we move forward in these times that are uncertain in many ways. One of the most important things that His Holiness offers as a spiritual teacher and as a contributor to the wisdom of the world is authenticity. His Holiness comes from a lineage of teachers, which is actually the oldest reincarnation lineage in the history of Tibetan Buddhism. The first Karmapa, Tusum Khenpa, was born in the year 1110, roughly 900 years ago, or now 904 years ago. And since that time, there have been successive manifestations of this teacher known as Gyalwang Karmapa. Gyalwang meaning Lord of Victorious Ones, Karmapa meaning the one who performs the enlightened activity of the Buddhas. And these masters have, as a rule, all been very prolific scholars, accomplished meditation masters, and very active in tending to the needs of their students and of the societies that they live in. And His Holiness just recently visited Zion, Illinois to bless a site that will commemorate the site of the passing away of his predecessors, the 16th Karmapa. So he carries with him this authentic lineage that he often expresses is quite a significant responsibility for him to hold. But with that, the good fortune on our part is the genuine authenticity and trustworthiness of the background and the training that goes into that. The other quality that His Holiness possesses is a genuine heart of innovation. Many masters, when they inherit these roles, have to find a way to bridge a tension between the ancient ways and the traditions that they are preserving and the times that they're currently living in, and maybe some changes that need to be made to the way that things have been done in the past. And I think His Holiness very masterfully demonstrates the ability to keep the essence and the important points of the tradition while at the same time innovating and pushing us all forward, encouraging us all to open and grow and let go what needs to be let go of. So in that spirit, His Holiness has been working very strongly with great concern for the situation of women and girls throughout the world. One of the ways in which this concern has expressed itself is his great and persistent and continuing efforts to reinstitute the lineage of full ordination for women in the tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. And yes, indeed. And also the ongoing concern for equal opportunities for nuns and all women Dharma practitioners. And furthermore, he is greatly passionate about the environment. He's not shy about letting go of the way things have been done in the past, because he sees that they don't work so well anymore for the health of our planet. And bearing this in mind, he has begun a very vast series of efforts to modernize the environmental practices of the monasteries that are under his direction and touched by his influence. So he's started a great series of changes in that regard in monasteries throughout the Himalayan region, and is, of course, as many of us know, has been a very outspoken advocate of our need to include care for the environment in our spiritual practice. And lastly, with regard to innovation, His Holiness is also passionate about technology, mindful of its dangers and pitfalls, but also appreciative of the great opportunity that it can provide for the preservation of the genuine, authentic wisdom that the world so desperately needs. And so he's also very much in dialogue with many of the major technological players, and is using technology to the fullest extent to help preserve and promote and, in where needed, reshape the wisdom of his own tradition. And then finally, the quality that His Holiness brings to bear is the genuine inspiration. Despite having all of these credentials, one could simply go through the forms and not really connect with the true heart of concern and care for others. But I think we all vividly recognize and feel in His Holiness's presence that he has genuine care and a vivid concern for the welfare of the world and sentient beings. And with all of the uncertainties that qualify our experience these days, I was in Nepal in 2000 when the news that His Holiness the Karmapa had left Tibet and had landed in India became known. And I just remembered remarking at that crucial time where the millennium was turning, I felt that it was really a sign that there is hope for the world. So thank you very much for coming here, and I'm so honored and humbled to introduce to you His Holiness, the 17th Gyalwang Karmapa, Ogyen Tenle Dorje. Thank you.
the Seattle Central ya Bebe Namalangi Songlo Yang ya Thoma
First of all, welcome everyone who has come to this gathering here in the city of Seattle.
Seattle Central.
Oh.
Maybe you should drink some water.
Yes. I also need to brush up on my Tibetan terminology.
And the America that thing super leche and the Gablia Ari that Sana Mongolia Shinche Zoshi di Larusham Mongolia Chimre Tandawani Zurche Nta Tamadi stop Sisterudi Samjosrudi and Seattle Tonke Dina Samjosu to Chebre.
This is my third visit to the United States of America, and the main purpose of this visit was to visit several universities in this country. But I've been given 2 months to engage in this trip, and where we have arrived now is at the concluding portion in the city of Seattle.
Kazandi Ari the Jacob Nalolia, Tuzu, Chuzu, Madra Tende, such Madra Mongoyeza, Kazandi, Tambo Minneapolis, Tatine, Suyon, Seattle, Yondusan, Chuzu go true name. Kazi go true name, the service which charge to Sresha, the name Dusane, T. Usen Tene. This Garfrada Kandatari Tawasov Summary, the name of Chongche and Rang Samba Shinji, Mashe Tuyalia, and Subi, Nuben Damada, Lasso Yungure, the Indusana, that Thomas Jan Songolia, Titolian.
So I'm becoming accustomed to the fact that there are many time zones in the United States. So the place where I was at before I came to Seattle was Minneapolis, which is 2 time zones away, and so this was very confusing when I arrived here. I really didn't know what time it was at all. And due to the cumulative effects of this very busy tour, I feel a little bit out of sorts. I haven't fully recovered from an illness that I was working with, and so I'm not so sure whether I will be able to deliver the talk that I had wished I could give. And so please bear this in mind beforehand, and I request your kind patience.
That is Jesuiti and the calling for compassionate action. That is begin analogy, Gunaji Kansar. Compassionate action get down. That is that under the Niji or Jesuit music to our cigar.
Ninji Chawala Kulwa.
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 Kijun Ragmada. And the day is an that day Niji Sadi 간다 디지 philosophy 사람으로다지 신이리보다 안다지 logic 사람으로다지 균쟁게 남자 드시자 마임바 따딩원에 전에 수수의 셈을 나눠려야 지 닝려야 수백 거네 초화로 지 띵상위에 토하네 딱 간다 개인코 차와는 주가로 드리지 용과디 드리지 충분히는 인지사지 민도토로 근데 뭐 충분히는 아니 인지사지 민도토요 말에 제상 인지 코랑 오늘 제가 compassionate action 라네 말라네 인지 이 코랑 액션을 같이 차대요 알아 something
The title for today's talk is A Call to Compassionate Action. So this strikes me as an interesting title because compassion itself, really, the genuine form of compassion, goes beyond mere philosophy or logic or intellectual pursuits, but it's something that really has to be born in the depth of our mind, something that really has to pierce our heart. It's something that has to come from deep within us, and part and parcel of compassion is a sense of responsibility for carrying that motivation into our actions. And therefore, really, I would say that you don't even need to say the phrase compassionate action if you understand the true meaning of compassion, because the true meaning of compassion is that compassion must involve action. And if we can have compassion like that, then we are practicing genuine compassion. If we don't have that type of heart translated into action, then we can't really call that compassion in the most genuine sense.
the spiritual practitioner somewhere. That is really to church on Yamle Nanget is Karasung or Sana. Ninji Mesa, that let Hamuba somewhere. Ninji Tomar Gengensilia, Ninji Mesa, and Ninji Tambu gave a Korea, that's Shamsa somewhere, Shapoya, Marbuano. That day. Ninji chawa tomando chi de me jing zi chi ara sta mar ba mi ji le ninji ru ge mi na ko da ji tome chawa san da do the first action somero ta di ka ru ji mar ba ru chi ta ina di person sam chi ninji mi ji ninji action first action ina ninji mi ji ka ru da mar ba ga da ge yo mar de yin bi na ta di ka ru sung go ra sana ninji yu me sa di action yume somarbata ji dindiji chawala ngos jugne gocham gwa chi re ma to be nijin go tsona di ta kan chawala ngos jugne gocham gwa chi.
So therefore, compassion is something that needs to show up directly in our actions. And from the perspective of Tibetan Buddhism, there's one body of teachings that says the sign of a compassioner the sign of a practitioner first beginning their practice of compassion is that they relinquish eating meat. That this is the gateway practice or the beginning practice of compassion, a first step of an action of compassion. So there are teachings that say that, but that's just a symbolic statement. It doesn't necessarily mean that we absolutely must refrain from eating meat if we are to practice compassion. So there's no mandatory rule in that regard. But what this is teaching us is that our compassion definitely has to be translated into action in some way.
안데 인주스탄에 인지사데 지 셈게 천안을 섬을 지 삼동안 삼시당 매바차 삼시 뭐이바 다디지 수수기 링아 토리아 되네 지 응원도 교벌을 진짜 연구하리 개심사래요.
That's it. And to say this in terms of body, speech, and mind, we can say that compassion isn't just something that happens in our mind or our heart, but it's something that has to become evident also in terms of our body and our speech.
제가 드제게 다 가지고 셈게 천안디 링아기 지가르라다 차와스네 라도 링아기 레가 토리아 주버지야리아다 트레이닝 스는다도 간다라 데리아 정다르 체당 망보시타요.
That's it. And there are many avenues of training that provide opportunities for us to directly bring compassion into our actions of body and speech. So from the realm of our mind and our feelings and into our body and speech directly.
대야지 지 류기 차시에서 말면 지 류기 차시에 레네 산안장도 간다 소수기 에네 차시 레레네 안 간다지 니지기 다 누가 흥규를 요하기 냠레 제다 나서죠.
For example, there are all kinds of different practices that allow us to make manifest the experience of compassion in every single part of our body, to express compassion through every single pore of our body.
베랑아주 미기 semjen신달이야 따외급리야 아니 미신달 semjen신달 따외급 디급리네요. 에네 닌지 냠랭기 심버치자 다보고 미기 따세기 semjen텔이야 닌제외로 데르지 수수sem이야 개버치야 데르지 닌제외로 티기 심밤 닌제외로 티기 게 가르레지 당선을 나도 저기 나도 마예베 나네 심지신다들이야 대시 이 따외걸레 미기 따외걸레야 다디지 가르레 장게 셈기 나로리야 세베 사바디 애니 미기 따당 토네 애니 첨바차 섬을 미기 따당 토네 다디지 냠렌차 다디지.
For example, there's one practice that is taught that encourages us to work with our gaze as an avenue of compassion towards sentient beings. We take the sentient beings that fall into our visual field and we try to ensure that the way we look at them is a way of looking that is embraced by the heart of compassion. We try to have the glow of compassion, the radiance of compassion, pervading our eyes and our gaze as we direct it outward toward any sentient being that we might see. So this is one of the ways that the teachings provide us to train in looking at sentient beings with the heart of love and compassion.
다나지 장게 지 나외 지 심지신다기 지 장 심지신다기 게시아베 년배 겁리나래 다가나 신기 텔라소베다 디스버체네 제가 다가다지 왕부공아 섬으로 다 진짜게 고 칸테네 간다지 아주디 수수기 닌지디 템버처 닌지 냠네 대단 제네 닌지 냠네 치다로 두시.
In the same way, we can train ourselves to bring compassion into our experience by working with our perception of sound. Whenever we hear the sounds made by other sentient beings or the sounds of the voices of other sentient beings talking, we can try to suffuse that perception with the heart of compassion and the feeling of compassion. So in this way, as exemplified by what was just mentioned regarding the eyes and the auditory perceptions, we can bring the practice of compassion into all of our perceptions, of all of our 5 senses.
다른 집에는 지금 미신다를 지금 셰켄을 제제 지금 라보로 땅 아니 야나 지금 하고도 제제 제베 거리냐 다른 신기 간들지 수수기 대지 제외 삼바서로 닌제외 삼바지 유리 개버치제 근데 지금 닌제외 삼바디 심베 관에 에너지 근데 닌제외 삼바디 오늘 저녁에 다 버리고 텔려야지 배 지금 가서 터치를 지다들이야 투가예요, 그치다 리가예요, 그렇지. 다들 지금 코베 나로래야 수수인 용법 정도 맞아요. 아니 버르뷰 되기 랑스음리야 지금 자와요, 근데 버르뷰 되기냐 지금 소르트웨어를 지다 용투가 그렇지다 릭투웨어를 지. 다들 지금 간다를 가셔야지. 인지 니버데 파 쪼고요, 알아. 파 쪼고야 돼. 개첨으로 시작이 알아서.
In a similar way, we can cultivate compassion and bring it more deeply into our experience when we make physical contact with others. We might extend our hand to shake the hand of someone else, or we might give someone a hug. And when we engage in these types of interactions, we can try to generate compassion in our heart and really radiate that compassion out to the person we're interacting with. So that it's not just us who are feeling this warmth inside of ourselves, inside of our own limited body, but we're sharing that out so that the other person is really touched and affected by the compassion that we're sending them. So we can bring this into our imagination and into our practice in this way, so that we're really sharing the energy and power of compassion with others.
어떤 링인 주선 진짜이다 지 링아 이송이 제바스는 라도 야나지 타나지 미기 따다한다 다가는 신기 나의 팀은 numzu 춘제 탐제 라지 닌제의 삼백이 심벌을 제제 드리지기 냠랜데다 니마지 뭐인바 나와지 뭐인바 로지 뭐인바 아다 드리지기 무튜네 지 냠수 레용주스타네 안 드리지기 가르쳐다지 냠랭 가르쳐다지 타투버르지 공배용배 겁리야 아니 지 미신다 런이 통화점기 지 미신다다 가르쳐 심기유기 지 가르쳐다지 시당르지 여인데 런신기 시와차다 셈리아지 가르쳐다지 런신기 시리와다 지 제외 삼바도 런신기 낭기 공배용하로 근데 용구여임래
As we practice compassion in this way, bringing compassion directly into our experience of body and speech, whether it be through the way we look at others, through the sounds that we hear, through the smells that we experience, and so forth, if we embrace all of these experiences in this way with an attitude and feeling of love, and we continue practicing this from day to day, from month to month, and from year to year, then what can come about is ultimately we can arrive at a place where even being seen by another person will cause that person to feel at peace, will cause that person to see the easing of their own mind of aggression, and will cause that person to naturally see an increase in their own experience of love and kindness. This kind of result is really possible.
Then that the 남바 상계의 슝루 딱 가르쳐지 댄슈 나로래야 시에샤부터 배나 전주선바 참바르지나 메드리아 다 전주선바서나 메드리아 부드산도 그렇죠.
Lesson.
참바스 공기체래야 참바스 슈고야 좀센디 안 고란다지 통마라지 가르쳐 참배쌤 깨버는 손데 아니 상마게 봐도 어느 간다지 참배게선 ganga지 냠내는 게 냠내는 남의 인상 되게 윤세는 되는 명이네야 둘다도다 참바스 제제 명토되지 다 야와 참바디 배는 김상하르지 나로래야 패비는 미잔지 나로 패비나 아니 공기 샵디 미잔디 나로래야 다 가르쳐 고역 나로래 샵지 샤바선지 애니디 가르쳐지 미잔디 난고 다 가르쳐지 사이 큐엔텔레 예베 지 소샤지 총마 춘제 다는 신데 드라미 조르지부터 소샤 탐지에 있으면야지 시와영아 에너지 이 참배 공기 참배 셈되기 탐지엘리아디 지금 저 촌나로 줘야지 참배 셈이 촌나로 줘 근데 연구에다 손 다디 그럼 댄주나 티샵 되는 시대 다는 생아랑기 미지나로야 당외 수지 냠수녀가 채비냐 기부 담보 망보지 제야 고급 중요비에서 아는 망보지 군들이야 자외 거리야 담보지 수수 셈리야지 다지 가져야 되지 이 마대와다 이지 롱롱 무슨 거다 이리야지 마대와다 다지 녀런부터 예비미냐 아니지 라마디 군주 자외 될 때는 미세 가마세비나 랑기 강게지 랑기 똑바도 좀 마시네 아니지 셈리야 지 시와요한데야지 제가 당보 라마디 제가 루두스다는 지 셈리야 남도 왕보지예지 얘는 남아 제산 수로 연데서 셈디 시디르비지 수로아야 되지 그지 뭔가 알아요 제가 디교전되네 다디 가르에서 참배니바 암제베니바 지망행을 지슈
In the traditional Buddhist texts, there is a great legend about a figure who is known as Maitreya, sometimes depicted as a bodhisattva or a great courageous being, sometimes depicted as a fully awakened Buddha. Maitreya, or Champa in Tibetan, literally means loving kindness. So he is sometimes called the regent Maitreya or the victorious Maitreya, the victorious one with loving kindness. The reason why Maitreya received that name is because he is famous for having engendered a genuine heart of loving kindness and made a very strong commitment that from that time onward, until the time he gained complete awakening, he would never relinquish the heart of loving kindness and would always promote loving kindness and always cultivate loving kindness for sentient beings. And the stories go that whenever Maitreya would visit a family home, for example, even him setting foot in that abode would cause all of the creatures in that area, in the places where he set foot, to feel a profound experience of peace and love in their heart, as if they were experiencing the loving heart of Maitreya himself. They themselves felt great loving kindness in their own heart. And this happened to all creatures, it said in the texts, from ants on upward. So that's one example that is given from the traditional texts. And then in terms of my own personal life, I've had the fortunate opportunity to meet with many genuine holy beings. And my experience with them has always been the same, in that being around them always causes my mind to be at peace. Sometimes when I'm initially going into their presence, I might be very worried or upset about something, or maybe my mind is filled with thoughts and very busy. But when I actually am in their presence, all of that subsides, and I experience a state of well-being. The thoughts just naturally settle. And so I think that this really illustrates, both this traditional example and my own personal experience really illustrates the power of loving kindness, the power of love.
다이네 다디 지 가수에 지 가수지 최냐면 생게 뒤서 코너를 이해해 버리지 신다를 해야 돼 슈퍼 파워 이제 개 말에 다디 코멘스 뭐 다디 상으로야 알아줘 들리지 제외 뉴가 상으로 이해해 되지 세큘러스 뭐 다디 내가 이해해 되지 배랑 아주 배전시 셰비나 이제 아메기 제외 뉴가 상으로 아메기 제외 뉴가디 가수지 쇼셔부지 이해해 되지 간다르지 아마디 예비나 아까 티르면에 미산디 나로려야지 아마도 예비나 안 랑기 랑기지 미산디 지 제외기 다 가르르지 디 제외기 가르르 뉴버디 미산디 차상 캡되어 버리지 되게 용대야 버리지 다들 지 손아로 좀 아주 용대야 야 아마르지 지 미산디 나는 자와 첨부 신경지 강사지 시위입니다 안人신기야 미산디 디스치가 창문로지 손나 소화데 디스 자와 매버로지당 주기 매배 손나로 디지 디지 찬도요 아래 근데 디균세 때네 제외 뉴바다 참지 뉴바사데 나라도 상으로야 예대비시다 상매 디지 제외 뉴바다 참배 뉴바디 아주 상매기 디데베지 다 가주지 뉴바 첨부디 아주 상매기 뚠투야지 다디지 슈퍼 파워로 지게 저요 말에 다는 신기 튜모만 배게 저요 말에 아주 상만 튜모도 예대비 계주시면 제공 지시고
아마데 정성나
벤더 아만드라고지가 디 김산난기 나로라 테케어 챙기지 정성 되네 feeling
But it's not the case that this power of love is only evident in a context of spiritual practitioners. This powerful love is available in a secular context as well. It's not like a superpower that you have to do something really special and unique to gain. It's available to everyone. For example, I think the power of love is really nicely illustrated by the presence of a loving mother in a room together with family. When that mother is present, her love touches everyone in the whole room. It fills the whole room. And when sometimes we have the experience of losing such a precious, loving mother, we really feel the absence of that immediate presence of warm and vivid love when that being passes away. And therefore, I think that's just to give one example, but really this power of love is available in common to everyone. It's not a superpower and it's not something reserved for special situations. It's something that we all can share.
다원아지 인지사도 따뜻하게 참바도 인지고 쉐야래. 인지사디 또 넘용 아주 쉐야되지. understanding 쉐야되지. 미신다 동행래야지. 지 가수다지. 삼시에 제법 삼시. 된대지 말해. understand 쉐야되지. 삼시에 제법. 된대지 저야 말해. 다나 신게 좀 미절래지. 양아 인지사라지. 피티 소아라지. 봐. 된대지 말해. 다 그래서 비직 소화를 지미네 양한 인지섬들 대선 지미나 아 되는 때네 직전에 동해 마을 줘야지 년가요래 디 인지사들 비직 소화를 지마이 봐 양한 인지사 지마이 봐디 인지 섬진디 인지외 니 가서지 동해 되네 ndembachi in samar diji ni dub da jawa ya ji diji gi gandara simshu da 지금 jawa cha ya ji diji gwa de ke 좀 cha ya
As we have discussed, loving kindness and compassion are not just an understanding that happens in our mind. Nor are loving kindness and compassion just states of pity, thinking thoughts like, oh, that poor thing. If loving kindness and compassion were just a state of pity like that, then there would actually be the danger that compassion would create more suffering instead of alleviating suffering. So what compassion has to involve is not only understanding the suffering of sentient beings and not only feeling a connection to that, but actually feeling a great commitment in relation to that, thinking, I'm going to do something to alleviate this being's suffering. And so this is where encouragement and inspiration come in. Having encouragement and inspiration as part of our compassion is very important.
More involved with cultural dedication, some energy, the cultural that Lodong Samba said, Sora Kasai, Moe Samba, running Moe Samba. That the Jiggy cultural somebody, Mangochi Yoga, Tana is more involved with action, some of that country, Chawa, Lagland and Javi. Chawa and Javi, that the Nijuko. Tana Singi needs Sade, she Karsue, needs Jesse, you pay Yerche. Needs Jenkin Kasati de Yerche. The Niji Padalaji, Tade, Kavar Chimbuya, Niji Tonaj, Tony needs Saj, my chair. Niji say in Jusana Nin Jesse, you did that, Nin Jenkin Kasati, your Maverson and Random. Tini be Jidun Jeve, Sona, the district Tone in Jigawati, Kata Susugi, Kansa Puributi, Chashi, Chazandi, Susugi, Karati Chash, the Yonzo, some of Daji, Susu, sort of Chich, Chashi Yonzo, sort of Chich, the district one in Nijigoma.
That's all. Parable Yam Yonzo.
The Chazan Kablin, Poribo, Yonzoti.
Lasso.
Rangi Karash Lawi and Rahumda. Don't ask me so.
So, our practice of compassion is a practice that involves great engagement and great dedication. Dedication meaning commitment, but also dedication in the sense that we are dedicating ourselves completely to the individuals that we want to help. And so, in this way, it's very important for our compassion not to be thought of as being between ourselves as a source of compassion and a sentient being way over there as an object of compassion. In true compassion, there is no great distance. There is no great separation between the source of compassion and the object of compassion. True compassion involves the feeler of compassion and the felt for blending together as one, so that we really embrace the totality of the people that we are feeling compassion for. We're really opening ourselves to the entirety of their experience, with no separation between ourselves and them.
Subject and object separation. Subject and object get beyond subject and object. Beyond subject Randa Shenleji. Some gauge and roguage. That did chism she did Shumba Tizuji and also she Karsueta. She comes of the Soar of the other risk some of Tachi in the Shavina. That the Yankat was rare. Chazanga Chilin some sort of jig. Then this is Chitin somebody, Nyojo or something. Chitin somebody, ngazui da ji rang da xian sa de kebar chimbu yue de ji da ane ji rang da na xin gi kandar zhongduo mangbu ji chebal den xie an kandar ka shuo de risk samar nian ga samu de sha ren wo re da ge si de ji me bi na nian ga samu de me bi chi ko rang gi ngang ge ju ga chi da chi yong tu sam.
So the genuine practice of compassion then involves going beyond the borders between ourselves and others. We no longer try to draw that line. And to the degree that we can succeed in going beyond that separation is the degree to which we will be free from fear and hesitation when it comes to helping others. Sometimes we want to develop compassion, we want to help others, but we feel some sense of hesitation because we feel that it might be dangerous if we try to go there, if we try to get involved in that way. But if we open up our eyes and go beyond our projections to see that there is no solid separation between ourselves and others, then that fear and hesitation will decrease, and we won't be so worried about seeing compassion as a risk. Rather, compassion and love will arise very naturally.
Kadang azu samlo ji zhongduo dang ji gundi mangbu chi chiga re di tuandam dong a samlo da ji romi ba ji gwa an ji didu ge swai ba ji gwa da na xin ge a zu samlo ji ga re ji le ji dian ge zhe ba chu ni so mar 아 저 다지 수수 다지 장왕 관의 초토야 멸치 찌리 찌대네 속아야 멸치 다들이 이제 찌리 찌대는 잡아디 아주处理하래 이 디균선 때네 한 삼성아 되게 다시 go back to the sort of origin somewhere 다지 수수에게 멍시로 가리면 봐 디토리아 마 로시 에너지 삼동과디 계속 시간이 있어서 좀
Lesson? Foundation said. So this dissolution of the boundaries between self and other means understanding how one's own suffering and happiness are actually a part of the suffering and happiness of others, and the suffering and happiness of others is a part of one's own experience as well, that we are all mutually dependent upon each other, and that we're not actually these solid, autonomous, independent creatures that we sometimes imagine ourselves to be. So returning to that basic origin, the basic foundation of our being, in which these distinctions are not present, is very important for the practice of compassion. Lasso? So I think it's suitable to conclude at this time because we have many more insights to come from our additional speakers. Lasso? So we have many youth leaders who are going to join us in discussing the topic of bringing compassion into action. Lasso?
Good example.
Lasso. I actually had a chance to meet these wonderful young women and men a short time ago, and I really feel that they're a wonderful example because we spiritual teachers, we mostly talk about compassion, love, and so forth. But these young women and men are really putting that into action in a very direct and helpful way. So I very much appreciate what they're doing.
Thank you, Your Holiness. I would like to Thank you, Your Holiness. I'd like to introduce the panelists who will be engaging in some conversation with His Holiness. And I hope you will, panelists, you know who you are. You can begin moving toward the stage now. Ta Kwese is a refugee from Burma and a member of the Karen ethnic community. He arrived in Seattle on July 3, 2007, after many years of struggle and dislocation. Ta is a student of social welfare at the University of Washington. His response to the call to compassionate action includes co-facilitating arts workshops, which allow fellow refugees to process trauma. Ta is featured in the book Forced to Flee, Visual Stories of Refugee Youth from Burma. Silas Follendorf is an outreach worker for youth care, among the most innovative organizations in the country addressing youth homelessness with a continuum of care, including food, shelter, and clothing, the essentials, but also counseling, GED and high school classes, and employment training. Silas is on the front lines of compassionate action, going wherever youth are living outside, bringing a friendly face, food, clothing, medical kits, and letting these displaced members of our family know that youth care is there for them when they're ready. Silas. Jennifer Hotis is a cancer researcher, artist, and poet. Jen brings her compassionate inspiration to the arts collective Love City Love. She is a member of the curatorial team who facilitate healing through the arts. Their open mic nights are well known for welcoming the most diverse group of people anywhere in Seattle by providing a radically open space for spontaneously sharing music, poetry, and visual arts. Rakita Roundtree is a professional school counselor at the Loyal Heights Elementary School. Rakita, where are you? Here you come. As well as being a married mother of two, in addition, Rakita is a teacher with Roots of Empathy, a program that has been recognized globally for shepherding significant reduction in levels of aggression among school children while raising social emotional competence and increasing empathy. Habib Bejatna is a youth ambassador for Seeds of Compassion. Seeds of Compassion hosted His Holiness the Dalai Lama in Seattle in 2008. As a youth ambassador, Habib promotes compassion in schools throughout the city, with a focus in West Seattle. He will soon graduate from the University of Washington and inspires to bring compassion into his training as a physician. Olivia Smith is also a youth ambassador for Seeds of Compassion. A core value of Seeds of Compassion is exploring the relationships, programs, and tools that nurture and empower children, families, and communities to be compassionate members of society. Olivia is a student at Seattle University. Her passion for serving the community was inspired by her high school experiences in the inner city of Seattle. As a youth ambassador, Olivia is active as a student mentor, focusing on student truancy. The format of our discussion will be for me to introduce a short video, and these videos will help us to better understand the activity and perhaps personality of these leaders sitting in front of us here. And immediately following the video, one of the leaders will direct a question to His Holiness. And then, Your Holiness, we hope that you will respond to that question at that time. We supplicate you to respond to that question at that time. And so to begin, would you please cue up a video which will introduce us to Ta and his experience?
I only have this one picture of me and my mom from Burma. My father was alcoholic and we left him when I was 6, me and my mother. I really hate that happened to me. Then she took me to a boarding school and left me. I saw her a few times, and then she moved to the US as refugee because my people, the Korean, didn't get full rights there, like good education and jobs. They just had to live in the jungle and hide. I had to leave the school after only 7th grade, and my uncle took me to Thailand illegally, so we had to hide there too. I was always living with other people, and I was okay, but I wanted my own family too. I miss my mother every day. I kept the picture in my Bible to keep from getting lost. I looked at it when I was sad, and I knew I would see her again. I hope so. When I was 16, one family took me to the UN office so I could come to the US too. I took the picture to prove that she was my mom. I went to the airport with other refugee families I knew from camp. I was scared because there were a lot of strange people there. Someone from the refugee camp was sick on the plane. All of the other families get off the plane in Los Angeles, and I flew alone to Seattle. The lady on the plane took me to the office to wait. My caseworker didn't come to get me. I waited a little bit longer time. And then out in the hall, I recognized my mom from the picture. It was the first time I heard her since I was 9 years old.
Ta, that's a very moving and personal sharing. And I want to wait until our translator is back before you ask your question.
Okay, ready. Hi. Hey, how you all doing? Thank you for the opportunity for us ask His Holiness question. My question is, I would like to state one sentence. We have been pain and suffer in many injustices in the world, and I cannot do this work alone. And we need alliances. My question is, how can we dismantle barriers of them versus us mentality? And how can we build awareness to build alliances so our compassion network can be supported?
How can we bring awareness to our...
Awareness to build allyship, and so our compassion work can be supported. Does that make sense?
chena de ma thangma di lo pa so ko di ore tene na so ning je khong du pe ya la ne yishu mo sang da nang sin rang dang shen thari di chen de cham di shi ku di ore tene shigya ge thapse so kare chena ento chan de
다들이야 또 내가르디 예서물이다 등기 쉬는 시에 장다 현사디 이제 타대 짐버서 말보다지 장다 현기 디도 타대 임을 선하고 저기 가래 한 될 때는 이제 가수지 미션다기 장지부기 개변의 미션다기 지 디도를 상마 마땅함 야나 랑기 개변 주야 ချက်미션다리야 한지 가수다지 다 두부동하나 서서 내리 좀 망고 정리 와래 대인 주산다 내리지게 아주 전신 지기지는 잡아야 돼요 미션다 두부 차위 주산 되게 랑그 무슈 규선이 랑이야 야부 연구면지 다 내리지 awareness 아주 과하게 계십시다 interdependent somewhere that nijigi azu developdi nijigi education da awareness di ji karshore da ji da jizo na lo le ya manzi ji karsho kyabda cha dida cha ke chim do spena education bena labde na lo le ya labde chi jung na lo lobzeng na lo le ya den den din de bi ta ka dar ji interdependent connection somewhere da ji da 다나시 핀주지지리아 gratitude somewhere that is shag awareness the labd 시중 나는 과의 계심스탄도 다나신기 가르쳐다지 신용 나로다 데자인도 아버지 총례의 데자인 칩식의 데자인 다나신기 엔시릭의 데자인 관계 나로래야 드리지기다 awareness the 마음으로지 지라체세 간단히 가수라지 가수라다 최소 계속 지고 뭐 임버체 디 secular 노르지가 다나시 common 지 참여지 도나치아 그리 충분히나 아주 디즈 야견抓了 팬도요 아주 대대 용으로 삼정
I definitely agree that we need to dismantle the us versus them attitudes. And we can do this by realizing that we are, in fact, actually not very separate in true reality. Of course, when we fail to realize this, then we work for our own gain without considering how that's going to affect others, or in the worst case, we intentionally harm others in order to bring about our own gain. So I think the thing that's most important is greater awareness of the reality of interdependence, how we actually are all continually depending on each other and connected to each other. And one of the fields that I think can help bring this awareness about is education. I think we really need to
value some of that.
Also, the value of interdependence. And not just regarding interdependence as some philosophy, but as a value that we can share and teach each other about. I think that we could really stand to hear more in many avenues of society about how we're all connected to each other and how we can actually have a sense of gratitude for each other because of that. And I think there's many opportunities to introduce this emphasis in schools of various different levels, both elementary schools, high schools, universities, and beyond. It's a point that could use greater emphasis in terms of economic education, in terms of political education, in terms of scientific education. I think there's room in all fields for us to increase awareness of the value of and appreciation of interdependence. So this thing, what we call interdependence, isn't just some kind of spiritual talk. It actually applies to our regular, secular, common world. And I think if we can pay more attention to that that principle, then the concern that you raised will be benefited. That will improve that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ta, for sharing your journey and your inspiration and curiosity. We'll see a video short now featuring Silas.
Nobody starts life planning to fail, right? Nobody in your life will ever start life planning to be homeless.
There are these young people who have chosen to sleep outside in the cold, in the wet, because their home situation is no longer bearable.
When you start talking to them, what you understand is that they're coming from families that are struggling through poverty, struggling through homelessness themselves, struggling with drug and alcohol addiction. Young people running from physical, emotional, and of course, most horribly is the sexual abuse that many of them experience.
They've overcome tremendous odds in their life and really just need that one chance to prove themselves, and they do.
When we go on outreach, the main thing we're doing there is building rapport, meeting young folks where they're at. Hey, you know, we're around. If you need us, we have snacks, we have socks.
It's a really nice, non-judgmental way of getting youth to not be scared to come in and ask for help.
If we can stop that one night on the street, we can stop a lifetime of struggle.
The James W. Ray Orion Center is a place that provides drop-in services where a youth can come in. And we provide breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Folks can come in, take showers, do laundry, take a nap. We also have shelter at night. I came to Youth Care and I came to Orion just as a part of being homeless in Seattle. The staff, the second time I came back, remembered my name and knew me. And at that point in time in my life, I didn't have that. The work that Youth Care is doing is changing lives, irrefutably so. That is the turning point on the timeline that is me in my life.
Can we stop every family from struggling? Absolutely not. But can we prevent every young person from falling victim on our streets? Absolutely. And we can do that through a strong prevention program. We can do that through helping young people find their ways back to school, into jobs, and into safe and productive housing programs. Can we end youth homelessness? I think so. And I think together we can make a huge difference.
Thank you, Silas. The floor is yours.
Hey, everybody. So my question to you would be, how does one go about making this kind of work sustainable in the face of so much suffering and crisis and trauma? For me, sometimes I can feel like my heart begins to sort of shut down, and I want to take a step back and leave everyone at arm's length. And just sometimes running away feels like it's the only viable option for survival.
So ninjeki bepati yunrimbo gunde yunrimbo kyong gudwala inayang tene ninjeki bepala tsembe kapsu tene kale shebochik tongi ore dunga shebochik mangbo tongi ore tene degi sirube chorwa mangbochik lepki ore kale chembo re chamchamla 다 창마 육샤긴 죄적인 삼박이 삼로 숙천보 깨기오래 가능세나 둥알틸 통야기 the setap shida kala kapo res pela kandes 당len chego래
다디 가져다지 딱 가지고 현래야지 템버 주야디 지 expectation 지 가져다지 저 초진에 하술이야다지 자와다 명람지 야래 때 이민에디 자와다 명람디 expectation 지 많이 비치지 간다지 니마지 나로리아 지 거지지리아 펜도 쳇도비미냐 아나 더즈지기 가르쳐지 티지 이츠머르지 소마르바다지 장기 가르쳐야들이야 지 가르쳐 마음발이야 지 제야 좀도마서 다다 제심의 디기 수술다 이츠머 제지 디토네 수술이야다지 encouragement somarbe ta nijong ba pena ta di video di na no culture sa pena mi mang bu liya ta pendo che yin sa di thona ji rangi ngangi ji culture su su gi le ga cha di tuning de ba ba ji da a da na sing gi ten ji culture da samliya ji di gi ya ro ta ji gi cha wa chi ye yin sa ta ga rangi thone su su liya di gi ga zhe ya somarbe 디 개좀 시다도스 베나 가르스나 아주 미신달이야 베나지 수수 라바디 당번은 사범미는 미신달라 하네 지 가르소지 라바디 투는 사버소서나 사버소 또 말아 네 디균선 때는 지금 당번에는 저 수수 강 제버디 인 수수리야 다 가르소다지 일이야 다 강에 사야 되는 주 카르제 배낭 안으로 차셔비냐 이 베라지 빙아 카마 바스므로 카마 바차디 미망고지기 기부도에스 are you happy or not is 망글도 아니 럽지스탄 다디 오늘 저 기부 민두슬람나 is not appropriate
라서
이내야 I want to say not happy 이내야 I think 가르쳐 I think it's meaningful somewhere. Dinichi ba 직 전화 비행 제자 아디 아주 dinichi 돈 삼담인 데네 팬동 거서.
라서 When it comes to benefiting others and endeavoring to benefit others, I think it's very important to, of course, have hope and have wishes and aspirations, but then to try as best we can to separate all of those from expectations. And along with that, I think we should really give ourselves permission to really have some type of satisfaction in what we did even in one day. We do this work all day long, and then at the end of the day, I think it's really important to allow ourselves to feel a little bit satisfied that we have done these activities for this day. These are beneficial activities, and they're activities that will help to produce happiness for others. So we don't need to wait for the future in order to be satisfied now. We should try to take some satisfaction from the activities that we're doing now, because we need to be encouraged and we need to encourage ourselves. As we saw very clearly in the video, the work that you're doing is very meaningful work that's bringing direct benefit and really directly sparking an experience of happiness for these people. And when we see this, we naturally all feel joy in our hearts. And it's really important to take a moment and appreciate that and allow that to become a sustenance for us. Because after all, if our hand isn't warm, we won't be able to warm someone else's hand by grabbing it. So if we want to warm someone else up, then we have to become warm ourselves. And therefore, we should try to appreciate and rejoice in the work that we're doing, along with bearing witness to the sufferings of others. So in terms of, there's also an acknowledgement that the work is difficult as well, and being honest about that. So, for example, in my own case, people sometimes come to me and say, how is it to be the Karmapa? Are you happy? Is it enjoyable? And a lot of the time I want to say to them, no, I'm not happy, and it's not enjoyable. But it's not really appropriate for me to say that. Even though it's not appropriate, it would be meaningful. So, it's like that.
Thank you, Silas, for the work that you're doing, your courage and your sense of play. And please cue up, if you would, the work of Jen Hodis.
We have been conditioned to believe that there's one option before us. Love City Love shows you that there is a myriad of possibilities. The world is open to you if you are open to it. Right now, human potential is the biggest wasted resource. We are here to build that and grow it and use it to our advantage. To be creative, that's why we need it, and that's what Love City Love is.
In the 90s, Seattle was this really cool, raw, edgy, gritty city. What I saw happening was that all of the art venues and all of the artists were being moved out of the city.
There is a real clear or very apparent need for a space for folks to come together, to collaborate, to connect, to make music, to share their art.
We weren't going to discriminate on finances or skill sets. If you wanted to show some pencil drawings on napkins, you could come in and have an art show for a couple days. And that was the real kind of foundation of the project.
We're bringing an alternative route for artists to get their work showcased. We're bringing a platform for people that would normally be passed over. We're also a space for genuine creativity and honest human experiences to occur.
Love City Love is an opener. It validates existence. It puts you in front of other people to be acknowledged as a human. It's all just about the humanness. That's the mission here, is to give people a place to really be themselves.
If you believe in yourself, you can figure out a way to live your dream. And I think as peers, we need to hear that from each other, because a lot of us are so pigeonholed into situations or pressure from peers or pressure from the workforce or the universities or the institution.
If you wake up every morning and get out of bed, then you're well capable of doing something like this and participating in this movement of kind of curating your own environment, customizing it, making it special.
It was Love City Love. It was alive as biology. If I had to define it, I would refrain, because getting together was the motion of nomenclature. We were skin and bones and shaking hands and being newly friends. I felt excessive, but even excess was included. It was backstage and front row. It was the shadow of expansive intimacy. Thank you for having me here and giving me all your attention. It's very validating. The question that I have is, how, in a world when there's so much suffering and bad things going on, how do we allow ourselves to have fun, and not to have fun as an escape from reality, but as an embracing of life? And then also, how do you have fun as a human? How do you embrace your humanness? Yeah.
Dig nang ne kandes dungale yobe tapse mayimba ta ningje ki joksu gyobe kipo tangtang kandes te gore deni diwa nipa di kirangel ngone kipo kandes kipo tang duiduna kipo kandes tang ge yes kipo tang nang ge kandes tang nang ge
다 기부 단단히 거대 안염염시다매
라서
다디 간데를 시어는 거리 다디 디 가스바람 페나 가스르다지 아주 춘춘 거리야 다 노스체 시안 좀도 아주 춘춘 거리야 shunju goblia da mise da ji garfre pena new year samra pebe lusu da new year share gobli ti du sang azu sani losa ina togon onda ni sha kuma
Lasso?
sani losa de sharo ma chen
Lasso?
ane losa tsero ji samsa shakbu thanga jam da losa shakbu khaje yaras sam to aro da sani losa ina ya togon ni mi go ya ga da ji je 기부 담에 전화로 슈춤 시다요인데
Lasso?
드린 주스단에 따이네 근데 가서다 지 야가를 줄래 사회 제리야 이제 로사 담배나 디 룩스르지만 디 기부디 전화로 시다요음도
Lasso?
룩스르지
Lasso?
다 삼도 디 룩스르디 제알에 깔래르지 카시 디 제마고나 삼선으로 지다 데레 감배나 주데나 바 니에데나 삼선으로 디레지 탱데도
Lasso?
아데 데인 주스단에 디균센데네 딱 한다는 거 저기 참섬지 셈리아 간다 지조 네버를 망고지가 토하는 지 셈리아 딱 한다 가르쳐 쿠르 쳔보 망고지 내용 거봐 근데 이제 디균센데네 지 수수 지 참섬지 기부다 제방 야나지 딱 가르쳐 디게 기부다 나와르 시다 매버지 데 디균센데네 지 가르쳐 디게 수수 셈게 가르쳐다지 당연한테 맞으시
Lasso? Well, I don't know if I have a lot of experience of having fun. But one thing I can say is that when I was young, sorry, I'll try to stay to the mic here. When I was young, we used to get so excited about the Tibetan New Year. And we would count the days to when Losar, the Tibetan New Year, was going to happen. And if it was the night before the New Year's Day, then we would have a really hard time going to sleep. And that's really an experience of having a lot of fun that I remember, like having the feeling of having fun, waiting for Losar in those days. But these days, since I left and went to India, Losar is more of a traditional observance, but I haven't had the experience of having fun in the lead up to Losar. It's more of just the traditional rituals and ceremonies and so forth, and there's not a great deal of anticipation and excitement that goes along with that for me. In fact, sometimes I feel like I'd rather stay in bed and not go to those ceremonies at all. So, you know, these days sometimes we get caught up by this sense of the many great burdens that we carry, and sometimes we forget to have fun, and sometimes we don't feel like having fun.
다른 주산의 개치슈르디 아란루 차샤위나 다지 가르에 디 수수기 다지 셈기 쪼나르디 마 떼엔체 소머바다지 셈기 다 쪼나르디 베나 디나네 자 베나지 다 리모트야레 다나 신기 에너지 뮤직레 다 디즈 토네 미나지 수수기 다 셈기 에 가르쇼지 상보암 지두기 차르디 바 떼엔체 아니 가르쇼디 체윤지 산 데지 가르쇼지 판 소나르지 용디게 베소치 레이드 디균센테네 아니 가르쇼다지 에 가다지 라이브 코란 아트 드치 삼로를 땅치 디지 토네 가다지 셈리아 디스 가르쇼에 에 가르쇼디 serious 마제비체체 and more fun some more that art 드치 디스 삼타미나 디스 펜도르시 온디 투스 아 데르지 마당에 야부 쉬시운도
Lasso?
오케이
But I think it is important, as you noted, for us to discover ways to be cheerful, ways to experience delight in our mind. And so one of the ways I think that I'm able to do this, even up to now, is by engaging in art, painting, drawing, and also engaging in music. I think these artistic pursuits bring out the positive qualities of the mind and also bring out one's own appreciation of beauty. And so, in this way, I think one way that we can remember to have fun is by approaching life as an art, life itself as an art form, and remember to not take things so seriously all the time. So I think if we approached our lives that way, that would help us to remember to have fun. But other than that, I don't have too much to say.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jen, for reminding us of the possibility of delight and creativity and compassion. I would like to ask our videographers to please show the work featuring Rakita Roundtree.
Hello, baby Faye, how are you? How are you?
A warm welcome for a tiny teacher. This third grade class at Bishop John T. Walker School for Boys in D.C. is learning big things from a small child.
She's bigger, huh?
If they cry, you need to, figure out what's wrong with them.
Say hi. The boys are tapping into their softer side thanks to Roots of Empathy, an anti-bullying program that teaches respect and inclusion through babies.
Okay, all right, Daryl. They seem to, come down a little bit, not so edgy, because they realize that the baby is fragile.
It's kind of still all new to her.
With her mother by her side, Faith visits the students once a month for the entire school year.
It's minus.
The boys observe the baby's growth,
So about 24 inches.
learn her needs,
Let's see, what about this one? Okay.
and identify with her emotions.
So she's pretty quiet, she's pretty calm.
So if somebody's crying, I'll know how they're feeling, and you don't mess with them, you just try to cheer them up.
All emotions are not the same. That people make different faces when they have different emotions.
What is empathy? My hope would be that as they continue to grow, as they continue to develop, that they will be more understanding of themselves as well as others. Goodbye, baby Faith. See you soon.
In Washington, I'm Aixa Diaz.
Very soon.
Greetings, everybody. I am grateful for this opportunity to represent Roots of Empathy as an instructor and also as a participating family. I'd like to share a quote from Mary Gordon, who is the founder of Roots of Empathy, and then I'll ask my question. Roots of Empathy argues against the simplistic approach of a competitive world. Children learn that no one person has all the answers and there are no simple solutions. They learn that the best outcomes are achieved when everyone is given a voice and when everyone opens their minds and hearts to listen to others' voices. End quote. My question is, in Roots of Empathy, inclusion is compassion. So if inclusion is compassion, then can competition be a form of exclusion? Thank you. In Roots of Empathy, inclusion is compassion. So if inclusion is compassion, can competition be a form of exclusion?
Nganchogi tawala, nganchogi chokpagi tawala, tane nyingje karresuna changmata nyamdu ta ngacho nangdu chu, ngacho nangdu kelen tangwa drabo. Compassion gi chani drabo chagi wa, chani gi sur drabo chagi wa. Tingin chane tane den semte, den be semte, dendur chayaten. Dendur chena inchi magic mission dati machupa yang mena matangwa yang mena piwa drabo. Chag degi your base, chag your base. Dendur chena. Dona di insere. Dona di.
He's not sure.
Dendur chayati ta
Ore.
상배 초 용식이 베이스.
진도르 샤르.
So as a way of rephrasing your question, perhaps what I'm hearing is that a way of rephrasing it might be to say that is it possible for there to be a positive aspect of competition or a nourishing aspect of competition?
Maybe, or could there, or could competition be a negative thing? Could it be a way of excluding people,
right,
instead of being more compassionate and including people?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tadi 진도르 샤 니징 간다 쳐도는 저 따워. Tadi 지당다 가르레지 지디엔 타 자망부지다 진도르 샤제. 다지 이리지가 토안에다 야겐 드라 지지도와 잼바스나 다도 야나지 다지 다 gempham ke jindur maina antachi karjo tedan drawar ji yaro ji gempham ke jindur maina tedan drawar ji lemor tedan drawar ji yaro ji chedo anji zelen charo ji tade inji miji di jindur ina ji ji gegwa ji phamgwa ro ji ta inji miji dili ji karjo chowa thabo ji mewina ta kandar ji karjo eda teda chandrawam tele yagbar ji yaro ji ta jindur sambar dis yaro
Lasa?
Tendenci, ne sambalia. Tendi ninji dangana michaba de yon sigre sandos.
Lasa?
Bana mijigi, taji ninji di ani shenda mijawa ru yon aga bezu chabina.
Lasa?
An tako bezu chaji yon sigre sandos. Imbina Qur'an de miyu ngomati tadi miyu dile sambamina miyu ngomati ninji yon ade miyu re mada aji 진도르 셰지 gempham 지 가르저 수쇼 수팜사데 그 미유조지 많이 비치 미유조디 간다 코란 야기엔 줄 미유조를 되지 민주사들이 저 동안에 덴덴 가르저지 게다 메이비 요스이를 섬들이
맞아. Of course, competitiveness is a very pervasive thing in the world, very connected to a lot of activities we engage in the world. A lot of the time we might not be involved in an explicit competition where there is a direct outcome of victory or defeat, but still the feelings that go into that activity are very similar to a competition that does involve victory and defeat. So we get into disputes with each other in that kind of way. Even if we don't have an explicit motivation of competitiveness. But at the same time, I think that there is a possibility that competitiveness could harmonize with compassion. So I don't think it's always going to be the case that competitiveness would be an antithesis of compassion. For example, someone might be striving to improve themselves and striving to maybe set themselves apart from others in a positive way. And there might be a little bit of competitive attitude that goes into that or competitive energy that goes into that, but their ultimate goal could be compassion, making themselves a better person, more loving person, compassionate person. Their ultimate goal isn't to defeat someone else and just to gain victory for themselves. So I do think that there is that possibility as well.
Thank you, Rikita. And I was reminded in the video of one of the comments that His Holiness made about a mother's love filling the room and love not being necessarily a superpower, and how that came alive in the presence of that baby. So thank you for introducing this work to us. And our remaining panelists, Olivia and Habib, are both youth ambassadors for the Seeds of Compassion, and we'll see a bit about their work in the upcoming video short.
Your Holiness, compassion is a very broad term. We each have our own meaning to it that we hold very dear to ourselves. But I must say that based on my own experiences, I must say that compassion is a tool of mankind. It is the unbreakable bond that validates our brotherhood and unites us as a people. It is tolerance, patience, but most importantly, it is love. The most complex yet simple human emotion. It is only through love that the most unanswerable questions can be answered. And it is only through compassion that love can be found. The world is going to be in the hands of the youth. And the youth of today, I guess, will inherit the world of tomorrow. And if we don't know how to treat each other with respect and kindness, we're going to be living in a very tough world. So the Youth Ambassadors is a group that was designed to promote compassion and kindness within the youth community.
I'm not sure if the two of you have a plan, since we saw Habib, but we did not hear from Olivia. Are you trading off on the question, or will we hear from you after Habib asks the question?
We had planned that Olivia would go first.
Okay, very good.
So the communities that Youth Ambassadors works in don't look a lot like the community of the room that we're sitting in. They're very brown, and people have to find their own ability to activate that compassionate feeling that's always not given to them. So while compassion may look one way in a more privileged realm, compassion in a poor community looks like taking care of your siblings or making dinner. And a lot of times, that's not the compassion that society presents to us. That's not the divinity that people find within themselves often. But what Youth Ambassadors has been able to do and say, hey, there's a divinity, there's a compassionate piece that already lives inside of you. And in doing this work, I'm wholly inspired by, by the students that I encounter. But when I attend events like this, I feel like compassion is commoditized. Like compassion has a dollar value behind it, and not everyone gets to access and be a part of this privilege and this conversation. So how do I navigate those two worlds and bring the compassion that I see in spaces like this?
Tangarangi community la tene dila sopaki community double mares mitsogi dombala patana da Narangi community da mangchewa da brown chagi ore din mangchewa di brown mayamba mangchewa di roala tene din di tane diang ugo mangbo yore Narangi sachala din du 다 닝제 패야디 고갑 디 다링기 제림 낭신 시다시다 요마레 카린세나 프랑스라 갈레 다만다 체네 지초기 코란솔라 카레셰기 주스나 닝제 깡깡 셰기 요마레 콩솔라 테네 코란솔라 다 닝제 종야디 고갑 토스토스 뇽 나촌 낭신 자기는도 코란솔라 뇽 요레 tane 인다워게 청두 대응하는 도스도스 청벨레가 상상 통기 가능세나 단가 민제 종야기 탑시 종야대 근보다 tane 참참 가르잡을 미축보기 주요장 통기어래 tane tema yang bang ngangi community dalo ki mila ni ninja paya ki kokapta ninja paya ki chawa kandes pure to pure.
Penata ngazu karjwe penangara chunju galuya tangara kesa sasa da lumba kugyo jire andana ngara mizande benjo shtame de bchta be joshta tabe tuju ma che di kurug nal de de arbish tuju ma ba kurug na de de ta kanda benjo jo ine benjo ki neta kyobochi mi na ngazu same ki sambadi des karjwe je top same same giburuchi the just a tunjon shevin samba giburuchi andana shingi gaduine ji simjen tamjele ya ji chambada 자와 제가 뒤께서 이 망고 사용 그래. 제가 뒤 균제 되는 게 선불이야. 다 지조의 value 루치와 린탄디 근데지 샤마샤. 될래야 된대 개체 통도. 인사 지조 용조기 린탄디 지 칭외벽이 저번 피좀 서봐요. 근데지래야 린탄신不这样 마더베 and the Nansim Chamberlain is a national map. The Dijuns and the Midsummer Rashingi, the Cholia, each of Matabe, the Chingwegi, the long, Longe Tolia, each of Matabe Nansim Tolia, each match. To the Deco Kisha in their commerce. Deco Kisha, the new shadow. They do some of the Jidan Savina, Zawegi, Zawachiaki. Skills and another, Nubas and another, Yanaji Digi, Keshu losing an answer to Sang already. Even at the Peshu Madana, I go Karshu go Jim to Arab channel. When a midsummer, get a share Nubas somewhere. Language skills somewhere. Get a share Nubas and answer midsummer, Chunduin, Lebanon, Takarju, Tambone, Nuber Jore. 이내 배주 마당치 빼나 부지 가르 미멜 농도지 샤샤나 그 기제 랭귀지 측지 신스 말다 이 기제 측지 셰스 말에 가라서 배주 당가 말에 그래 주사 니지사데 대대치 버리 그 배주 당 디고 계속 망고 신년다 디고라 드네지 가르르다지 남균에 계속 망고시 디고라 링롱 망고시 드네체비나 then ranking rangi as language skill na ji de ko yagian drar chu ye de bi to si me du sa di ju se de na nga su ta value samar ji ni ji de value cha de rin tha sha de ji awareness dai education dang understanding ma ji ye bi mi na ta di ke chu sha thong dos sa ta ga dos song yo na lo nam ju so ye thwe le ya sa de ni ma kha she ji le ya chu zu kha she ji le ya ta de de
Lesson. Well, as you indicated, I think it really goes back to our values as a society and what we consider to be wealth, what we consider to be precious. When I was growing up, I grew up actually in a very isolated area of Tibet, in a very poor family, and we spent most of our time in our tent. And we didn't have a lot of wealth in terms of material possessions, but we were fairly happy in our minds. And I remember hearing talk about compassion quite a lot, like these Buddhist sayings about how it's important to have love and compassion for all sentient beings and so on. I would hear things like that a lot, and I felt that the people around me valued that. But in our modern society, I think it's much more difficult because we don't hear a lot of talk saying that compassion is important, love is important. We hear a lot of talk, rather, about outer forms of wealth, outer forms of possessions, outer forms of advancement and improvement are what is important.
Mobile phone, like that.
And so, because of that, then our faculties of compassion naturally then suffer from a lack of use. So I think we all have the seeds and the aptitude of compassion in us, but if that is not exercised, then it just remains dormant. Like, for example, we all have the seeds of language and the ability to speak a language in us. When we are born, that's naturally there. But if we were to be raised in some kind of environment where no one was talking to us, then even though that wiring was there, it would eventually become very difficult or close to impossible to properly learn a language because it had remained unused for so long. So I think one of the ways we can activate the ability of compassion inside ourselves from a societal perspective is for us to talk about it, engage in discussion about the value of compassion and how it's an actual form of wealth. That there are these outer forms of wealth, but there are inner forms of wealth also, and that these are special, precious, valuable things. So, of course, then when you ask how do we transform society in that way, that's a huge question. Promoting awareness through dialogue is very good. Bringing these values into our education systems is very good. But as you observed, it's going to take a lot more than just talking for a few hours about compassion, or even for a few days.
Let me just comment quickly. Olivia, I just want to recognize your passionate voice of advocacy for compassion, and I think we all have your back on that. Yeah. Habib, you have a question that you'd like to offer.
Your Holiness, my question actually directly ties into your response that you just gave. We live in a society that's very fast-paced. Life moves so fast that oftentimes we forget to stop and think about others. I've seen the ruthlessness that a highly competitive atmosphere fosters, particularly in the academic community. It leads people to be cruel to one another, and it's almost as if it's a stampede where everyone just steps over each other. And it's been my observation that our culture perceives compassion as almost a weakness. If you go out of your way to be kind to someone, it's almost perceived as if you're trying to hide or make up for some kind of deficiency. And, the thoughts that come to mind is, people always say, well, why does this person want to help me? What's the catch? Or experience has taught me that no one wants to help me without any gain for themselves. And these are the thoughts that I think all of us have felt at one point or another, and I can tell you for sure these are the thoughts that the youth are feeling. And if there's one question I could ask you is, how do you promote compassion in a society that puts more focus on competitiveness, productivity, and material wealth?
Ningje jea dos popular chagi mendu karian sena ngarang la tur karin chengen yongna a korang la kare gogidus korang ngata like chik lenya ki depa usere topa lepki ore namsang tene jamba mambo la tendabo usere dien du dinang ne jito tendabo ginang ne competitive shuk chambo ki jito dang tene chilo ki yage kangbala mikte ya ki jito dang tendabo ginang ne ningje kandes pelgure
that is samology business commercial samarbe samology business commercial dana singi kashwe dimi khashuda 다 딘지기 다 두주지 레베 인두사네 미 상원을지 가르쳐 네 가시들 거뇨 그는 초보 딘데 라요레스 초보 초보 니마 가시 초보사 의디스데 아 초보 라샤나 초보 라요레스 딘데 거뇨
라서
네 인두사네 네 인두사 미 상원을지 가르쳐 지 디기디 베지 가르쳐다 칭어벌이야 지 녀와라르니 텔레야 댄체네 상로지 가르쳐다지 유도를 줘야래 삼등도 스티키 가서 삼로 삼단단 삼로 유도 줘야지다 아다니지 시체리 야게도 칭 교부 시지 줘야비 인자 가서 삼로 땅롱시다 매지 다 간다 교부 시지 줘야비 인자 안디 삼 땅롱으로 시다 매지에는 가서 삼로 지 망부지 유도 줘되게 예지 다 드린 주산에 다디 주센데네 다 자왕 뭐 사지로 봐다 다디 가르쳐다 지 녀야 다기디 녀 시에산 다 람산으로 시아스케 장스케입니다
라서 Well, you're absolutely right that we're certainly living in an intense time of commercialization and commodification of almost anything. I even heard one story about some kind of service that exists where people are encouraged to pay others, to basically pay to have friends in a very literal way. So, these types of things, these types of changes in society are things that are happening so fast, and that there's a sense that we haven't had time to reflect on what is happening properly.
네, 제가 아주 가수에 남규 최소한 시합입니다. 가저 랜더와 매백이 저와서 드리지 시기요. 랜더와 매백 저와. 간다르 랜더와 매백 저와서디 더 조디 수술이야지 가수에 네급리야지 개변화다. 안 터두려야 될 대신에지 가수에 야고지 용하로. 네급도 터두고 든지 군중 가야매 봐. 군중 가야매 봐. 아, 든지가 토네 좀 현래야 지 현래지 가수에다 지 저와 코나다. 에너지 현기 디기 코나를 미거라. 든지 계시야. 제가 뒤로지 든지 랜더와 매백 든지게 딱 한들 지 저와디 아주 공평 동과디 개체부시라 동도스
라서 테네 공도 간데스페
등에 제셔
라서 One of the things that we talk about in the Buddhist teachings about training ourselves in love and compassion is really focusing on developing a love that doesn't hope for reciprocation and that doesn't hope for a reward. Whether it's a short-term reward or even a long-term reward, we try to make our love as pure as possible by having it, as much as we can, be focused just on the well-being and happiness of the other person that we're extending our care for.
다디 당기들 잡아차대요. 당기 녀셔야들. 계시 아주기 subject and object 리쉐브체. 아니 자와 신경지예브체. 자와 유유 타대버지. 든지 니예브 든지 아주 단 두시예브 전부 예비나. 데데지 랜더에 와서 아주 연구를 해. 가르사나 자와 댕겐지 연구를 해. 데 자와 랭겐지 연구를 해. 든지 유산에 랜더에 와서 저버도 연구를 해. 이내야 compassion 소머보다 니지 사바사데 든지기다 subject object 매버치지 딱 한달 런이 데 현기 차시여버지 현데 런이 차시여버지 든지지 차도여버지 든지기 뉴버를 제제 간다르지 다신 열매 상으로 든지기 통하는 침비입니다 아니 랜더에 와서지 용어 말마다 랜더에 와서지 가서에 든지기 subject object 매버지 랜더에 와서 용어 말하고 네 든지기 트레이닝 해야 돼 오늘 전에 가지 당신 예매기 니지 냠네 트레이닝 해야 돼 개접시다 그래서
So I think that the way to promote this in a more broad way is for ourselves to begin training in this type of love and compassion that has no separation between ourselves as a source of compassion and other people as a recipient of our compassion. If we are able to dissolve that boundary between ourselves and others, then our compassion will start to be free of hope for reward and hope for reciprocation. So dissolving this boundary between subject and object, and seeing that others are a part of ourselves and that we ourselves are a part of others, will help us to relate to self and other as inseparable. And I think training in ourselves first in this type of love is very important.
Thank you. Thank you, Habib. We heard that you intend to study medicine, but you also have a bit of a statesman quality in there, so all the best with your adventures. Your Holiness, I think we have reached the time allotted on the program. However, if you wish to entertain any further questions, we would of course be delighted. But otherwise, I will commence to thank you and our panelists here.
No, I don't have nothing to say.
Okay. Panelists, thank you for your kindness, your courage, your example. I think first and foremost for not only having the inspiration and giving voice to it, but acting on it. And Your Holiness, yes, please. Your Holiness, you spoke to us of love and interdependence and the importance of commitment. And it really seems that in your presence and in your words and in your life, you exemplify all of those things. We as people trying to make our way on this path, sometimes we have the words, but we have no example to follow. You have given us a flawless example, and we are utterly grateful. Thank you.